Okay, well, it's 12 o'clock, so let's get started with this. I'll start with the land acknowledgement for Athabasca University. Athabasca University respectfully acknowledges that we live on and work on the traditional lands of the Indigenous people, Inuit, First Nations, and Métis of Canada. We honor the ancestry and heritage of the Indigenous people, and we give thanks to them. So thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Crystal Zahara. I'm with the Faculty of Graduate Studies. And the library staff and FGS co-host this series once a year on basically your research journey as a graduate student. So this is the first part of our 5-part series. This one is Search Like a Pro. And Joanna and Jessica are going to go over some great tips on doing research searches. With that, I will just let everyone know that today this event is being recorded, and the recording will be available after in the chat, but then also I know Joanna, you post on this session is posted on the YouTube channel for the library, so that will be available as well, and Joanna will share links for that in case you need to jump off or you miss some of it. It will all be there. And the cameras and mics are disabled today just because it's over lunchtime and people are busy and doing whatever. So just to avoid any background noise, we have the cameras and the mics disabled. But if at any time you have a question, use the chat box. And then I know Joanna had mentioned that there's also going to be times for questions and answers after the session. So if you raise your hand, I can give you access to your camera and mic at that time. So I think that's it for me. I'll hand the floor over to Joanna. I believe you're first, Joanna. And enjoy, everyone. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Crystal. So this session is called Search Like a Pro, and we'll go over, I'll get into what we'll go over. So the first thing I wanted to do was introduce myself. My name's Joanna Namath, and I'm the Managing Librarian for Information Services here at Athabasca University Library. So that means I basically cover everything to do with public service. So I'm going to answer your research questions. I'm going to answer any kind of like front desk questions you're having, and I oversee all of that. We do have a physical library. You can come and visit us in person. We also mail out physical books. So you've got some info on that. I also have Jessica Jones joining me today. She is one of our new-ish librarians of 6 months, and she also answers research questions. She'll be running these sessions sometimes in the future, so you'll get used to seeing her, and she is here to answer questions on chat today, but I'll be doing the presentation. So feel free to post questions as we go in chat, and she can answer those, and then we'll also have time for questions at the end, and we can probably, depending how much time we have and how many questions we get, we'll be able to run through some additional stuff as we go. So if you feel inclined, I'd love to hear from you in chat, your name, your area of research, and your location, or whatever of that you want to share, or if you don't feel like sharing, that is fine too. It's always kind of useful to see what fields we're getting visitors from, so that's what's most useful, and I can kind of try and target and make sure we open up some health studies databases if that's something you're interested in. All right, so by the end of this session, you'll be able to apply the most appropriate search strategy in a variety of search tools, develop effective search strategies for a variety of search tools, and create a search strategy for your own research. This session will not go over how to use the library. If you are looking for basic orientations on navigating the library website and that kind of thing, I will post a link to our basic orientation. I'm also going to add in a link for our guide to the research process. That's going to be a bit more text-based, but we try to add in some videos and that kind of thing. And then I'll post a link to our orientation AU library series. This is the 3rd part of that, but the first 2 go over more of actually using the library and the basics of that stuff. All right. So this is kind of the idea of what we're going to do today. We're going to start out by going over keyword brainstorming. Then we'll get into how to use Boolean operators, so linking those keywords together. Then we'll talk about some of the more advanced strategies like truncation, wildcards, proximity, and subject headings. Then we'll take a look at actually doing some searching, and we will take a look at seeing, sorry, some weird thing just popped up, but I think we're good. We'll take a look at where things are cited and how we can find out how many citations a work has, where to search, and then we'll have time for questions as well. Okay. So I'm going to go into our RISE course. So this is basically just a asynchronous mini course I'm going to use some aspects of as we're teaching. But you can also return to this, and it can also be used by people outside of this session. So it's useful, and it'll give you some more details on everything. So I added a link in here, and this is what it's going to look like. So I'm going to start out by talking about the search process. The search process is iterative. It's going to go in different directions as you work. So you're going to start by treating the search process. We usually think of the search process as linear, but it kind of goes in a lot of different directions. So what you're going to want to do is start out by identifying your key concepts. So you need to ask yourself, what do I need to know about this topic to proceed? What are the main ideas I want to know more about? Are there population, geographic, time, etc. criteria for my topic? What are the best or most appropriate keywords for my concept? So those are the things to keep in mind as you're starting to think about your topic. So our first activity, we're going to look at this and come up with some keywords to use. So I'm going to send you a link. You can also put links in, or you can also put terms in the chat if you don't want to have multiple windows open. And you can see we reset these every time we do this session, so usually twice a year, and we always get a few people have already come in and added terms. So if you look at this is kind of, I like to think of this as the idea that we all start out with the same topic, which is, something like this image. And some of us are going to want to look at the bigger picture of maybe like travel diving, adventure tourism. Some people might want to look at like the specific scale conditions of these fish. Some people might want to look at sustainability and how we can protect coral reefs. So just to give you an idea of like, if we're all looking at the same thing, there's still going to be lots of different directions, lots of specifics and additional terms. So even if two people are focusing on the fish, it's like there's going to be multiple terms for the fish. There's going to be like the Latin word, the common words, and then different directions to go within that in terms of like the science and health or, cultural understandings of the fish, that kind of thing. And here is the link to the answer garden. Thanks, Jessica. I realized I just forgot to press send on that. So I'll give you a couple minutes to come up with some terms there, and feel free to throw some in the chat as well. So what you can see is 4 people have put in fish. So that's a more popular one. So the bigger ones will come up as larger, but we've got coral scuba diving, ocean research, school of fish, sea, deep, blue, reef, diver, water, diver with a lowercase d, coral reefs, diving, tropical, and coral. Okay, so we're getting temperature got added, getting a few more species, location. Good. Reef, I think, is new too. Just give you a little more time to come up with that. And thanks so much for introducing yourself. I'm also working on a master's in, I guess here at AU, it's master's in distance ed, but similar topics. And archival studies is always super interesting. So if we have time at the end, I'll go over some history-specific databases. Okay, let's see what terms we've got when I reload. All right, we got water and biome added. So yeah, that's just kind of to give you an idea as we start thinking about this. So the next thing we're going to look at is how to actually break our search up. So once we've come up with some keywords and decided what direction we want to go with our search, how are we going to break that up into different topics? So we are going to start with working on this question, which is, what effect does online learning have on the mental health of youth? So if we look at this, I've highlighted our main points, but what we need to do is we don't need to search what effect. What we need are our main concepts, and then we're going to come up with as many synonymous terms for that as we can. So in this case, we want to look at online learning, mental health, and youth. So I've got another activity for you. So I'm just going to share this link in the chat. What this is a whiteboard. So what you can do is all we're doing is coming up with as many synonymous terms for these three words. So just other terms that would be used to search this. And we'll get into why that's important. So if we were to look at online learning, another word for that could be distance education. For mental health, another word for that could be wellness. And that's also depends on the time period, what was popular at the time. And another word for youth could be young adult, teen. So the basic idea is that if we only search for online learning, we wouldn't get results that don't use online learning, but use virtual learning or distance education, that kind of thing. So once again, you can throw terms into the chat box, or you can add them in here yourself, and you can just go text, add text box. And I'll give you a few minutes to come up with terms. It's really useful to get other people's directions with terms, so it's always nice to get a broader group working on those. So I'll just give you a couple minutes to come up with some terms for that. Okay, awesome. I'll add that one in. Independent learning. I think we will add that under online learning, and that wasn't one I've used before, so I'm also going to add it into, we're going to use this as our demo search a little later on, so I'll add that into what we've got there. Ooh, emotional health is good. Emotional health. Another direction I've seen go is specific mental health conditions. So for instance, students have suggested depression, especially with the popularity in discussion around isolation, particularly during COVID, that could be another one. Adolescence, yeah. And you always want to double check your spellings if you're unsure, because usually you have at least one word spelled wrong, and then it makes it difficult to find stuff on that. Yeah, e-learning is another good one. And virtual learning. So as you know, Athabasca University is a distance education institution, so there's always a lot of terms in there. So I'll just show you some examples from our, oh, never mind, I don't have that one in here. I think we have it in Search Like a Pro. Yeah, we reset it, but it gets kind of wild with all the different terms, self-motivated learning, remote learning. So it does come up with a lot, and I will add accessible in. That's a good one. Okay, well, we've got a few terms coming out, so you can kind of get the idea of what that starts to look like, and then we're going to use this for our search, so I'll return back to it as we're going. Okay, so if we return back to our Search Like a Pro guide, what you'll see is we have a running search for this one right now. So we'll get into what the ands and the ors look like, but this is just to give you an idea. And obviously we were already coming up with more terms than this, but this is just for the visualization. So you can see same question. And you can see we've got youth or adolescent and online learning, e-learning, distance learning, and mental health. And of course we had wellness in there and depression and emotional health. So came up with some additional ones there. For this question, it was whether people are more likely to stay in their jobs if they have access to professional development. And so we had separated that into engagement or participation, and then in professional development, so other words for professional development, and then and retention being staff retention, how long someone stayed at an institution. And of course, there are more terms for these, but this is just to give a little basics. All right, so this is kind of how the search process usually goes. So if your topic is something like ancient Rome, say I get students that contact me being like, I need to write a paper on ancient Rome. Can you send me 5 articles? You are going to need to pick a focus area within that because, you know, for a course, whether you're undergrad or grad, you probably aren't going to write the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And even that is like focusing on the history throughout time, you know, war and politics and that kind of thing. So you're going to want to start with your idea and then just some casual sleuthing. This is where you can use Google or Wikipedia. This is not anything you're going to cite. It's just to give you an idea of what is out there on the topic if you don't have any specifics off the bat. And that's where you can kind of start to develop your own interest area. So for instance, you might want to look at women in the Hellenistic period or the rise of Christianity under Constantine. And so then you're going to find out more about your topic, decide on a direction. This is what we'll call casual sleuthing. And then once your course is set, you can head to the library and you've now separated your topic into a few keywords. You'll start doing some searching. You'll take a look at the relevant results and modify those, add in new keywords that come up as you're searching. Be like, oh, that's exactly the term I'm looking for. And then you'll revise and repeat. It's usually a lot of trial and error. So searching is often a large part of your actual research process. And you can also check subject guides. Memorial and AU both have subject guides on various topics, and other universities do as well, so they may even have suggestions of other terms to use. And you can take a look at recommendations for databases to use, and then you're just going to keep searching. And if you're ever stuck or you need a hand, you can always contact the library, and we are here to help you. All right. So we'll continue on. So next thing we're going to do is figure out how we're going to connect all those terms together. So the first thing I want to note is phrase searching. You will want to use quotation marks anytime you're using more than one term together. So if we were to search feral and horse, that would search for anything about feral animals, and then also anything about horses. So searching that together is where you're going to only be focusing in on feral horses. The same with emergency department. You don't need to search for stuff just about emergencies or just about departments. You want to search for emergency department specifically. So that's kind of how that works. We've got more information on Boolean operators, but Boolean operators are and, or, and not, and this is how we're going to connect all of the terms in our search. So if you were to use commas, the library search databases wouldn't be able to read those. So that's why we use these specific ones. Okay, so our ors are what we use to broaden our search. So that was what we were using in here to come up with our related terms. So if we were to add, we would add ors between all of our online learning or distance learning or independent learning or e-learning or virtual learning or accessible. So that's what it's going to do, is broaden the search. So if we look at this, it's searching for everything on Piaget, everything on constructivism, and everything on the theory of cognitive development, but it's also searching for any articles that are on all three of those, just two of them. So it's searching for everything on those topics. So other examples would be pediatric or child, vaccination or immunization. You can see how there's synonymous terms here: city or urban, deer or ungulate, break or fracture. Now, our ands are what we're going to use to connect our different points. So we would put our ands in between these. So we would say online learning and mental health and youth. So what the ands do is they focus the search in, they narrow the search to the specifics. So what you can see here is that it's not searching for just information about youth or youth and e-learning. It's only searching for information that's about youth, e-learning, and motivation. Only ones that have all three of those terms within them. So other examples would be like scoliosis and children, Alberta and food insecure, rural and education, robotics and farming. Now, the nots are the third Boolean operator, and these ones you want to be a little bit more cautious using. What you can see here is that we were searching for social cognitive theory and advocacy, but we kept getting results about marketing, and that wasn't what we were looking for. So we added not marketing. The problem is that there's this section here that's hidden that would be about social cognitive theory and advocacy, but it mentions marketing. You'll also want to think about where in the article it might mention marketing and how your search is looking at that stuff. But we can get into that when we do our live searching as well. So it can be good, but it can also be, you don't want to be lazy with your knots, because it can be easy to just be like, oh, I'm getting all these articles on a topic that isn't what I want. I'll just put not. And then you end up with just kind of having a lazy search where you just have like not to all the things you want, and instead of coming up with a stronger search and figuring out why those terms are coming up. So the example I like to use is PEPA. The PEPA framework is something that's used in healthcare, but Peppa the Pig is popular, and the Peppa framework probably isn't going to have any information about pigs within it. So if you were searching for the Peppa framework, you could say not pig to cut out anything about Peppa the Pig. The other example we have in here is if you were in a gender studies course and you were searching for information about rape culture, and you kept getting results about canola, which is also known as rapeseed, you could say not canola. So that's an idea of a way you can use not effectively. All right, so I want to see if you guys are starting to understand that. So we're going to do a little activity here. This is, I'm going to give you two terms, and you can just write in the chat or not, and we'll put it into that category. So diet, nutrition. I think everyone's a bit sleepy today, but I just want to make sure you're grasping this. Okay, good job. So diet and nutrition would be or. Those are synonymous. What about dog, canine? That is also an or. How about wetlands, species at risk? That is an and. Good job. Homeless, housing insecure. Okay, good job. That is an or. How about death coping? Okay, that is an and. Good job, everyone. So now we will move on to some of our more advanced search features. So we're going to start by talking about truncation. So truncation is allowing for a variety of suffixes. So what you can see here is different endings to the words. So you want to make sure to put your truncation as far to the end of the root of the word as possible. So in this case, advoca with a asterisk is going to search for advocate, advocates, advocating, advocacy. Child is going to search for children, child, childlike, childhood, etc. Now, construction, I like to use as a good one, as an example here, because putting the asterisks here is going to search for constructivism, constructivist, constructionism, constructionist, but it's also going to search for construction, which could be, building materials. It could be like term construction. Construction is used in a lot of different categories. So if you were getting stuff that was just about construction, you may want to move your asterisks back and do a search for constructive with an asterisk, and then construction-y with an asterisk, just to make sure that you're only getting those two topics if you are just looking for constructivism and constructionism instead of construction. Now, wildcards, I will note, I'm going to do most of our searching in our EBSCO searches today. And so these wildcards are used in EBSCO, but any database you're using is going to have slightly different wildcards. If you go into the help section of any database, it shows them. I find whenever I'm in ProQuest, I have to double check them because they're always slightly different, but they are really useful for developing your searches. So as you can see, the asterisk matches multiple characters. So in this case, all it's doing is anything that starts with HEA and ends with ONE will be included in the search. So it can be a little wild. So in this case, I'm not sure how useful this search would be if we were doing headstone, hearthstone, and headphone. But you can see how the hashtag matches one optional character. So that's really useful for these Latin spelled words where you sometimes have an AE and sometimes just an E. The same with the Canadian spellings where we have an extra U. So that is one of the useful ones. And then the question mark matches one character. So it can be really useful for these ones that the plural is put within the middle of the word. So in this case, we've got the three different versions of women, similar or singular, plural, and I believe gender neutral. So some different varieties of how you can spell those out there. And proximity. So proximity is a little bit hard to grasp, but I like to bring it up just so you can start thinking about it. So the example we like to use is incarcerated youth. So the thing about incarcerated youth is that if you use the phrase with quotations incarcerated youth, you're only going to get articles that specifically have that phrase. And sometimes articles are going to come out that say youth who are incarcerated or youth who are in prison, youth who are part of the system. And they're also going to use, teen and young adult and adolescent and all those other terms we started developing earlier. So what you can do instead of that is search for the terms within a few letters of each other. I usually like to start with 3 and then broaden to 5 depending on the topic and see how it is. But what you can see here is we've got incarcerated N5, which means within 5 words of youth, teen, or adolescent. So it's another way to kind of look at your phrases and think about the best way to search. The other nice thing about this is that if you had multiple terms for incarcerated, you could have those in quotations before. So it would be searching for, say, the only term that's coming to mind right now is imprisoned, but you could say incarcerated or imprisoned, youth, teen, young adult, adolescent, and then it would search for any relation of those two to each other within 3 to 5 letters and 5 words in this case, not letters. And yeah, I think that's it for that part. So we'll continue on to I'll just mention subject headings briefly, and then we'll see them when we actually do our search. But the big thing to note is that different databases will have specific subject headings. So when you are looking within an item record, you will see a list of subjects. Sometimes they'll have keywords as well. It's all dependent on what information they input when they put in their article. So that can often give you a good idea of additional terms to use. Okay, so now we're going to try out our search. I think I just have to make this a little bit smaller. The share screen always comes up right at the top of where I need. And then you can't click on the banners. Okay, so I know not everyone is from AU Library, but this is the library databases are going to work the same. So just giving you an idea of what that looks like. So I'm just going to start in our main search box, and we're going to go advanced search. And I'm just it'll ask you to sign in, and then I'm just gonna pull up the basic search we'd come up with so far. I added in a few additional terms I came up with as we were going. So what you can see here is we've got youth or adolescent or young adult or teenager or student or child or learner. A few. Student might be a bit too broad, but that's kind of, as we're searching, we can decide that and be like, let's get rid of the student one. And then we've got various terms for online learning. You'll see I tried to add the quotations and truncations wherever I could, but I didn't do wildcards. And then we've got our mental health line. So we've got mental health or wellness or well-being or mindfulness. All right, so if we search, sometimes it makes me search a second time, so we'll see how it goes. Okay, so we've got some results here. So what we can do is take a look, see how they look. All the databases are going to function relatively similarly. We're in EBSCO right now. So what EBSCO has is if you click on all filters here, you can use the limiters. So for a lot of your courses, you're going to need to limit to peer-reviewed articles. So you can do that here. And then if we scroll back down to the bottom, you can search that and you'll see it's going to cut down our results. And EBSCO's also been really slow the last 2 days. I was realizing, I was like, it's not the best one to demo with, but it's our most popular one. So it's the one we usually use for that stuff. Okay, so you can see we've got 600,000 results, or like close to. So you're probably going to want to think about further ways to limit, but we'll leave that for now. And feel free to jump in if you have some ideas of how we should further limit. I do want to show you a couple things. So if we take a look at this one, so we can see that this one is on nursing interventions for university students. So as I said, student might not be the best term if we're specifically wanting to look for youth, but it is on online learning and resilience. So that might tie in with our topic of wellness or mental health. But what you can see here is we've got our subject headings. So those can be useful to start to get an idea of like what directions you might want to go, how you might want to focus. And then they've got minor subject headings here. This one is also a scoping review. So we do have a lit review session coming up, but there are ways you can limit to particular methodologies. And the other thing I'll show you, this is why I was saying it's useful to kind of think about why articles are coming up and whereabouts the terms are listed. So if we were looking at the not, if you were to put not pig and we were doing the PEPA framework search with not pig, right now what it's searching is any of these terms anywhere in the item record, but also if there's a full text linked, it's searching for anything even within the full text, which could mean that pig is mentioned in a reference, like one of the citations, or it could be someone's last name. So that's where you want to think about how you can limit so that you are getting specifically what you want. So it's usually best to start with your all field search. But if you were noticing, let's get rid of students since we were saying that one might not be great. And then you can also limit here. I usually recommend starting with abstract because what you want to do is make sure that these terms are listed somewhere in the abstract, that it is for sure about that topic. As I showed you, you can limit to subject headings. You're usually going to want to use those in more specific subject-specific databases. This is very interdisciplinary, so its subject terms are going to be a little all over the place. and a little unregulated. But that's kind of where you can do that. You can also limit to the title. I don't always recommend doing that. It can be useful in certain databases like PubMed particularly. It's nice to do a title and abstract search to see if the term is listed in the title or the abstract. But that's where those are. So usually limiting to abstract is a good way to go. So you're going to see there's going to be a few less results. Those are the important things I wanted to note for you in our search. The other thing I'll show you is recent activity. This is going to be your search history. So I wanted to do a couple of searches to show you how that looks. So you can see we did 3 searches and it's tracking those. So you can see it lists the limiters we used. So in this one, we just searched for everything. And it should say, yeah, the number of results, and you can see we went down like 300,000 there, just limiting to peer review, and then we added in an abstract limiter, which will show up right there, AB. If you click on this, it'll run the search again. These kind of things time out, so you do want to be cautious. I usually like to copy any useful searches I'm doing into a Word document or word processing document of any sort, just so you have it separate, because this will time out when you stop searching or if something goes wrong on your computer. And our Keeping Organized session will go more into how you can go about journaling your search. The other thing I'll note is, depending on the database you're in, links. So if we go back to this search, a lot of databases, you have to create a persistent link. So if you were to just use the hyperlink, you wouldn't be able to get back to the results, which is why I always recommend keeping a list or your search that you were working on somewhere. So if you were to copy this out, this does work in EBSCO. They just updated and that's their new thing. I'm still having some problems with it, but I'm hoping they'll keep developing as they go. But I'll also note that if we go into any of the items, you can download there, but we've got a cite feature. So if you find an article that looks really good, I recommend just grabbing the citation. There's going to be some typos in this. This is computer generated. In this one, usually one of the big ones is capitalization, so the title shouldn't be capitalized like that. So I think it's always good to grab it so you have all the information, but it might not be, you will want to go in and edit it before you submit it as in your reference list. But the other thing to note is that this hyperlink won't work here. So if you press share, it'll create a link for you when you press create link, and that will return you to this page. As usual, always be cautious. So as many places you can have something saved in different ways, always good. Sometimes if you just save the hyperlink and it doesn't work, that can be really frustrating. All right, so we'll go back to our search strategies. And the other thing I was going to show you is, as you're working on your search, I kind of talked about this, but the idea is called snowballing or pearl growing, and this is an actual methodology you can list if in your methodologies, but it can be really useful, especially for topics that you're really not finding stuff, even though you've like worked really hard on developing a search. So looking through the reference list, I always recommend see who is cited, take a look at the articles that are cited. Are those ones useful for you too? Pull up some of those. Look at the subject headings as I showed you. Those can be a really good way to come up with additional terms that other authors might be using in the field. And then cited by, so who else has cited this article? That can be useful for seeing the impact, but it can also be useful for finding other articles on the topic. And you can also check out the journal or the book it was published in if it's a book chapter. So if we go back to this one, I believe this is a journal. So this is published in the Journal of Autism and Development Disorders. So you could then browse that journal and see what other articles there are on that topic. Because libraries have weird subscriptions, they'll usually have subscriptions to, say, the Journal of Autism and Development through a bunch of different vendors. So there's usually different ways to search for those. But another thing you can do is just search it on Google, take a look, and then go into the library to find the articles that you're wanting. So that's another way to do that. We'll skip tracking references, and then cited by is the other area we wanted to talk about. So it's nice to be able to see how many times an article has been cited, but also who else has cited them. So in Google Scholar, there is a little cited by. Keep in mind that this index is only indexing other articles that are in Google Scholar. So Google Scholar is always going to have more than the other databases, but the three main ones that have it are Google Scholar, Web of Science. You can see it has citations. You can see 7. If you click on that, you'll get the list of citations that have cited this article. And Scopus is the other one. And different databases talk about getting it, so that those can change or new ones can come up. You do want to keep in mind that just because something's cited a lot doesn't mean that it is the most reliable. You want to look at the citations. It's possible that they're all disproving a theory that was written, or that it's just old. Something older is going to have more citations than something that's newer. And yeah, so that's kind of that part. And then last, we'll talk about where to search. Okay, so I've had this running for a while because people don't have that many ideas, and they're, we're all kind of looking for similar things usually, but if you have any that you'd like to add, what types of sources you need. So you can see here, people have added systematic reviews, health informatics, guidelines, and then you can see they're liked too. So I'm going to assume that more people also need those. Health policies related to healthcare. I'm not sure what I'm doing. Peer-reviewed sources, strategic planning, gray literature, theses, nursing history, primary research. 26 likes for primary research. That's a lot. 39 for peer-reviewed. Peer-reviewed resources and PDFs. So if you think about what you need, we can also do some digging into those. So I've created this accordion that you can use to take a look at different places. You can search for that, search for those things, and how to go about searching for those. So it gets interesting when you get into like statistics or community voices, that kind of thing. And this should link. I haven't added this, but we do have a data specific guide from our data librarian that has ideas of places to search for stats and data. We also recently came out with a primary source guide, so that covers primary sources in the sciences and the social sciences, because we find we get lots of students looking for primary sources in history where they actually need like an original letter or a newspaper, versus students in the sciences who need primary research, which means empirical studies. And then, of course, theses and dissertations are another big area. And yes, Jessica added the data and stats guide to the chat. So that's all I've got for today. So you have time for questions, or we can wrap up. I'll just go back to our slides. And of course, if you come up with questions later as you're working on your search, the big thing to note is that the library is here to help. So feel free to email us with any questions you have. The next session, let me pull up the link for that. And I can't remember which one is next. I think maybe Jessica's teaching that one.
Yeah, that's Intro to Citation Management is next. And
okay,
here is the link to register for that. I just threw it in the chat.
And us on the right side just created this page where you can go to find our webinars, our upcoming webinars. So you can see that we've got Search Like a Pro we just did here. And as Crystal said, we've got the registration here for citation management, the dates. So Jen Rempel, one of our other librarians, will be teaching that one. And then Keeping Organized is Jessica and someone from the right side called Sarah Jean Watt. Research Data Management is our data librarian. And then I'll be doing Intro to Lit reviews with Sarah Jean as well.
Patty, if you need a letter of attendance, I am more than happy to provide that to you. So I'm just going to throw my email in the chat here, and then you can just say, just email me saying, hey, I need a letter of attendance, and I will provide that. Just let me know who I need to send it to.
Perfect. Thanks, Crystal.
Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions. So I just want to say thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everyone, for coming out today. Thank you, Jessica. And yeah, we hope to see everyone at the next session. And have a great rest of your day. I hope you have 15 minutes to eat your lunch before you have to go back to work.
Yeah, thanks so much for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all at the next ones, and feel free to follow up with any more questions. It's hard to come up with questions unless you're actually working on something at the moment, so. And thanks for hosting us, Crystal.
Of course, always. My pleasure. Okay, see you everyone.